Hello and welcome to Talent Talks. My name is David Allison. This series of webinars and podcasts provides an insight into the changing world of work. It's a conversation with those responsible for recruiting into companies large and small across all sectors, industries and regions of the country. We're exploring some of the many changes that are happening around us today and the even bigger changes that are going to happen in the next few years as we deal with recovery from the pandemic, new working patterns, and the huge impact that automation is going to have on all of our working lives. My guests today are Becky and Jarashan from Microsoft UK. So we all know Microsoft, don't we? After all, Microsoft powers over 75% of the world's laptops. Word, Excel and PowerPoint are ubiquitous, and Microsoft is also behind platforms as diverse as LinkedIn and Minecraft. But whilst they're well known for these products in schools, homes and companies all over the country, some of the most exciting developments are taking part outside of the direct view of consumers. Microsoft are leaders in cloud hosting, the ability to store and run applications and websites. They're making artificial intelligence available to organisations large and small. Fundamentally, Microsoft is transforming the world of work. Not just what we do, but where and how we do it. One of the most interesting things about Microsoft is that in addition to the team at Microsoft UK, there are over 25,000 Microsoft partners across the country who develop, support and service Microsoft technology. As a whole, that makes the Microsoft network one of the biggest employers in the UK and also one of the most accessible to young people wherever you live. So before we hear more about the world of Microsoft, let's meet Becky and Jarashan. So both of you, welcome to Talent Talks. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Becky, let me come to you first of all. You are the apprenticeship lead for Microsoft UK, and I know that that's a very, very broad role, which includes running Microsoft's own programme as well as working with other employers and government to design the future of apprenticeships. So tell us a bit about it.
So I think firstly, the broad smile on my face when you started to introduce Microsoft just reminds me every day the privilege I have to work with such an awesome organisation. So I'm beaming like a Cheshire cat at that piece. I have an awesome role at Microsoft. So I lead Microsoft's apprenticeship programs in the UK, a hugely varied role, David, as you suggested. So I get the opportunity to work with our internal UK business, deciding and discovering what our strategy is going to be, to designing those apprenticeship programs and bringing new talent into our organisation. And then kind of the other part of my role is looking at working with government on creating those apprenticeship standards that are fit for the future in digital. How can we make sure that apprenticeships contain the knowledge, skills and behaviour for every person that decides to take them to have a successful career in digital? And then taking all of that stuff that we do internally at Microsoft and being able to kind of work with our partner network that you alluded to, so that we're able to share the impact that we have as with apprenticeships internally in our business and give back into that ecosystem so they've got the opportunity to deliver apprenticeships as well. It's not just for Microsoft, this is about how do we create a wider societal impact.
I mean, and as well as Microsoft, your career's spanned other professional services and recruitment organisations too. So you've got a good understanding of the whole way in which recruitment works for young people.
Yeah, it scares me. So I've been doing my role for over 10 years now and have had many different roles and have enjoyed every single one of those. And every role has been a learning experience for me. When I think about when I started out 10 years ago, terrifying, about how we kind of looked at the approach of bringing young people into the business, what were we going to do? And that was at my time of Capgemini. Just being able to be at the forefront of all of those developments and how you can change and repivot what an entry role into the world of technology could actually look like, and how that has kind of evolved as an experience, both for the candidate, so for the person that's looking at taking an apprenticeship, but then also for the business, the kind of the consumers of the apprenticeship program. My role is always about project managing an apprenticeship program. I'm not the person that, like with Jerry, I'm not the person that delivers his day-to-day work. I'm not like the person that sits with him, teaching him those new skills. How do I enable the business to deliver the experience we want our apprentices to have? But then also understanding what is it that the apprentice is looking for from any of those employers that I've worked with as part of their apprenticeship.
Thank you. Oh, that's pretty comprehensive. We'll come back to some of those points in a minute. Jaroshin, coming to you first of all, and in terms of your experience, you've been at Microsoft since was it October last year, so you were hired during the fun and games of the pandemic.
Yeah, so I came in since October, so very new. That was the beginning of my professional life. But
Yeah,
right from then, that was probably the best thing I did. So I was sitting there for like 8 months. No cancelled A levels and straight into the professional life. That's how it started for me.
that must have been a pretty big change for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had jobs before, but nothing like a professional job. All my jobs have been like labor manual. So it was definitely a big jump from just reading textbooks, doing something to actually having a job.
And what is your role at the moment then, Jaroshin?
So I'm a data analyst apprentice, and I sit in the global solutions team.
Yeah. And what
So
does that actually mean then? What do you do on an average
yeah, so
week?
I'll break that down. So what I do is I sit in a team full of sellers who sell products to the biggest 500 companies in the world, and
Right.
so I'm in the EMEA team. So I work across with all the different countries in EMEA. So yeah.
And so sometimes actually we find it's quite interesting. EMEA is a phrase that's used a lot in American organisations, but what does that actually mean?
We're
So
testing you now, Jerry.
Testing you, absolutely. Part of your apprenticeship. What does EMEA stand for?
let's hope I remember. So yeah, do I remember? Becky, do you want to take this over for me?
I'll do it. Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And by the way, acronyms at
Oh, totally.
Microsoft, David, you've encountered this with us. So sometimes it just becomes a separate language for us. Sometimes we just use it without really thinking about what it actually means. So just for Jerry, don't worry, you can test me later.
And that's quite a big responsibility, isn't it? It's a huge part of the world that then you must be getting exposure to all sorts of different interesting challenges across those different countries.
Yeah, definitely. Like one of the biggest things I like about my role is I get to talk to like the most senior people from the biggest companies, and they have issues, and we have to like provide solutions. So that's one of the most like intricate things about my job.
And you've been doing all of that working from home, presumably, for most of the time as well.
Yeah. So obviously this pandemic has been working from home, but I know nothing new from like nothing else from working from home. So for me, it's not that unusual, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Lee. We'll come back to you again in a few minutes just to kind of talk more about your experience of the apprenticeship and what it was like actually applying to Microsoft. So, Becky, I gave a very brief introduction to Microsoft earlier on, and that they were my words, not yours. But perhaps you could fill us in on some of the gaps. What's Microsoft like as an organisation?
Really great question. It's the most exciting place to work. And I say that from somebody that's been in the world of work for many, many years. Never, one day is never the same as the other. So I think there's always a huge amount of change every single day. So although you kind of wake up in the morning and I've got things that I need to achieve every day, there will always be something that comes in sort of left field that I kind of have to achieve. I'd also say you'll also hear it quite often about Microsoft is the way that we approach our work is through growth mindset. We absolutely live and breathe that every single day. It's not just something we say as part of a recruitment campaign. It's not just something that's kind of written there and we all go, yeah, that's right. We live growth mindset every day. So when I think about collaborative work as a team, I think about learning from mistakes and making improvements, the supportive nature of being a Microsoft employee, but then also within our partners, network, whatever, that kind of infiltrates right the way through our ecosystem. So I felt hugely blessed during this period of the pandemic that I've been able to work with such an awesome organization. It challenges me in different ways. So, David, you and I have worked together on some of those passion projects that I've had. Microsoft allows you that freedom and ability to kind of take ideas, test them, see whether they'll go, are they going to work? And to have that freedom is second to none in the kind of, your quality of life as a Microsoft employee.
So, a great place to work then from that point of view. I guess one of the interesting things, and we're lucky to have you to help with this conversation, is that Microsoft is really at the heart of driving the changing way in which we all work. So get the crystal ball out. What is the world of work going to be like in 10 years' time? Because I think one of the challenges we see working with schools is that there's going to be such a big shift in the skills that we value and think are important in 10 years that actually not all of those are going to be in the curriculum today. Where are the biggest changes going to come from, do you think?
And it is something that we live and breathe every single day. So I'm also part of a wider skills team, digital skills team, which sits at the heart of Microsoft UK. And we're kind of facing and tackling these issues on a day-to-day basis. They sit with us and we think about how we're going to own that approach around skilling. The biggest thing to me, and what makes me laugh, not in a bad way about this subject, but is then how my close friends and their children also now have to get like Auntie Becky coaching on what are the future skills of work you're going to need. Data sits at the heart of everything, right? If you think about the shift that the pandemic has accelerated, Satya always talks about, who's our CEO, talks about how the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation that perhaps would have taken 10 years, 15 years. You've accelerated that in the space of 6 months. So therefore, that means that our skills, like whether we're about to enter the world of work or whether we're in the world of work, we need to adapt and change that skill set. So being savvy around data is one of my big things. Like you can see it popping up in jobs. So how do you analyze data? How do you understand data? And whatever jobs we're going to do in the future, we need to be more skilled digitally to be able to adapt. So when we talk about the influence around AI, so artificial intelligence in the world of work, that's not necessarily there to replace jobs, but how do you work with that technology? So being kind of digitally competent around understanding data, understanding how you visualize it, how you work with it, for me is the game changer. So every student and every parent really kind of digging into those data skills, super important. Like you can't, if you're going to be a scientist, you're still going to need data. If you're going to be a lawyer or an accountant, and I look at accountancy apprenticeships at the moment, and we're really blessed to be working with a provider that really understands our need around digital in finance and accountancy, being able to kind of use Excel and SQL and Power BI. I'm using very Microsoft terms now, so that's our product.
Yeah.
An accountant isn't going to sit there with a book going forward. It's how do you use digital tooling to kind of be able to kind of power those jobs of the future. So it's a really important subject that's close to my heart.
And I think one of the things that always strikes me is that, I mean, it's quite easy to understand the way in which digital will relate to jobs in science, but actually digital is going to drive retail, it's going to drive hospitality. In fact, you almost can't find a sector now where digital is not going to be at its core within the next 10 years.
And I think we see it internally at Microsoft. So Jerry's like spearheading a new wave of apprenticeships in our internal business. So that ability to take huge amounts of data and be able to work and liaise with teams to help them understand what's happening, what are the analytics showing you, just shows already that wave is starting to happen in our business on those kind of operational roles that we have. And David, when you know for me that this is a great passion, that digital doesn't just exist in the tech sector. Digital is everywhere. So when you look at fashion, you look at ASOS, you look at Zara or any of those kind of big brands now, you look at what their footprint is, huge in digital marketing, the analytics that run behind that, and then how they get that product out to customers. So I would say, and that's why digital skills are so important, because the world of work is so evolving at pace that not having those skills doesn't mean that you're going to be successful in a non-tech job, because every role is technical now going forward, I think.
And Joe, let me bring you on this one. I mean, presumably that's reflected in the kind of customers that you are working with in your role.
Yeah, definitely. So most of the customers we deal with, their biggest issue is having too much data. What do we do with the data? I mean, one of the skills that I think is lacking in my generation definitely is lack of data skills. It's great to learn about your basic math and stuff, but it's not very practical in the sense that when you have a massive customer and they have like tens of thousands of customer data, what does it actually mean and what can they do with it? So it's really echoed there.
And presumably across all sorts of sectors as well. I think, one of the things that always strikes me, again, going back to that Microsoft partner network, is that although Microsoft UK is a relatively small team, there are all sorts of opportunities to join Microsoft and that Microsoft ecosystem and kind of create that career in digital, literally no matter where you are in the country.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me, David, is we've worked together over the last what feels like years. I'm sure it's only been about a year. Has been you look at where digital jobs are coming from, and they're not just in tech companies. So they're not in just in the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Microsofts. Even as small down, and I was doing some analysis on our apprenticeship, the Microsoft Apprenticeship Connector, but looking at some of those, right, just the places that you'd not expect to find digital roles. And I think for me, it's around understanding what the opportunity is. So where you're in an exploration and being curious at either school or whether your parents is go and explore. Like digital means so many things to different people. But if you, for example, we're doing a piece of work at the moment around the English Cricket Board,
Yeah.
kind of needs a digital skill. That's all of that is evolving. We've got one of our apprentices in one of our partner organisations that talks beautifully around how her data analyst apprenticeship is so applicable to sports. Analysing player data, understanding the metrics from how fast somebody ran up a pitch or not. So it's just understanding that it doesn't pen you down in what you're going to do for the rest of your life, but taking and understanding and owning those digital skills at such an early stage gives you a platform for opportunity in many sectors.
So, I mean, Microsoft is in this for the long game. Obviously, it's going to take some time to do all of this. So, what are the kind of activities that Microsoft do with, for example, schools? And I'm also particularly interested in addressing some of the stereotypes, I guess, of the kind of people who are into tech. How do you see that evolving?
So there's a couple of things that we're doing, and I think what's interesting for me in this conversation, and it's been around for so many years, is how do you in effect join up the supply end of the kind of recruitment and attraction. So when we as large employers have to have quite a joined up process from schools and from colleges and from where people are in their lives into the world of work. And it's about how do we make it easy and how do we make it simple. So one of the big drives we've got at the moment is how do you simplify all of those programs that we have in schools. So thinking about DigiGirls, for example, or the schools education platforms that we run, putting everything into one place. So we'll be launching that whole initiative in the coming months, which is quite exciting, right? To just be able to have one platform to join everything up.
Yeah, so school teachers out there should definitely keep an eye out for this one in terms of its launching, I think, later in April. Thank you. Jared, let me come back to you then, and kind of what was your road into Microsoft? Because I looked at LinkedIn, obviously that Microsoft platform, to have a quick look at you before we had this conversation. Was technology always where you wanted to go? How did you find out about this opportunity?
So my path was probably very different to most people. So I initially was doing maths, further maths, economics for my A levels, and coming from a background where my parents, like, the only thing they knew of was go to university. My brother does medicine, my sister did English at university, so it's a very academic background. So I didn't really have exposure to apprenticeships and anything to do with actual jobs. So when I was fortunate enough to be a part of this program called the Social Mobility Fund, and they just told us once, okay, this is what apprenticeship is. But then I looked into further. I was like, okay, I get paid to work and they pay for my studies. Why am I not doing this? So then I applied. I was just on LinkedIn. I was just like scrolling down, and I saw a previous apprentice at Microsoft actually promote it. I was like, okay, let me apply. Then I applied to that Microsoft and a couple other apprenticeships, and then like I went to one of the other apprenticeships, like the review day, and that was in finance. So I was like, maths, further maths, economics. I'm gonna do finance, aren't I? And then so I went to it, and I was like, okay, I'm here at the investment banking floor. Do I like it? No. 6 a.m. start, 8 p.m. finish. No, this life isn't for me. So then I was like, okay, maybe tech is something I want to go through. So I did some work experience at another big tech company, and I was like, okay, tech's something I really enjoy. So I applied to the Microsoft apprenticeship, and through the process, I somehow found myself here.
Yeah, somehow found yourself. I suspect that it wasn't quite that easy, but I'm going to come back to Becky about that recruitment process. And I guess one of the things that we see is that there is so much of a bias towards university at the moment in terms of schools, Ofsted, and parents as well. When you kind of said no, I'm going to go to the apprenticeship route, how was that received by the people around you?
I mean, first of all, my school was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Like, not many people do it. I don't know if it's going to be good for your like whole professional career. And I was like, okay, so why wouldn't it be great for a professional career? They're like, not many people do it. I was like, that's not a reason not for it to be good. So the school wasn't very like like pushing me to do it, and my parents were just like, no, just don't do it at all. But luckily, my brother and sister, they're like quite young and they understand this. And even they were like, don't do it because having it like going to university is a solid thing. Everyone's been doing it for years. If it's like not broken, don't change it, like people say. So I was like, okay, fine, let's not do it. So it got to results day. I got into all my universities and I had my offer from my apprenticeship. So my thinking was like, okay, let me forget what everyone's thinking because everyone around me was saying no. So I was like, okay, let me look at the facts and figures. So, okay, if I stay in apprenticeship, I have everything paid for. I have no student debt, and I have a higher chance of getting a job after I finish. Right. So my thinking was, if I just do it, follow it through, and I see where I get. So it's only a 2 year course I'm in. I can potentially just defer my years at university if I don't like it. So that was my thinking. So now I'm almost like 6 months in my apprenticeship. I'm like, okay, I definitely made the right decision here. So that was my thinking.
Yeah, so no regrets then, and it is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I guess one of the challenges for a lot of parents, certainly kind of my generation, I guess, is that when we went to university, it was free or really subsidised, and
Yeah.
and actually, I look at the kind of debt that people like you are running up if they're going down that university route, and it's kind of terrifying. It really is.
I'm letting
Yeah,
you
definitely.
go.
I can definitely echo that. I see my brother's he does medicine, so he does like £50,000 in student debt. I'm just like, it shouldn't be like this for me to get a career.
Yeah, and I guess we don't want to get too close to the politics of it, but the reality is there are
Yeah,
still some careers, and medicine's a good one where actually university is still the only way into it. Although there is talk of an apprenticeship down that route in the near future too. So thank you very much, Steve. That's really interesting. So, Becky, let me come back to you then, and tell us a bit about the hiring process. So, for those people who've been listening to this and are interested in finding out more about joining the wonderful world of digital, what should they be doing?
So I
And I think
definitely,
you're on mute,
am I on mute?
Becky. It always has to happen at one point. There we go. She's not on mute. Go for. Oh, no, she was. She's not. She's not.
Okay.
Go for it,
Yeah.
Becky.
So no, I because obviously lockdown, still working from home 1 year on, my dogs have decided to start playing. Everybody. So the recruitment process for Microsoft, it's we try and be as fair and transparent as possible, I have to say. And it's about the candidate experience. This isn't about us. The kind of mantra that the team always run with is around how do we make sure that somebody that joins our business is going to be successful. The worst thing you can possibly do with apprenticeships is bring somebody in not with a realistic expectation about what it's like to be an apprentice at Microsoft. So we're very keen on making sure that it's as real as possible. We use strengths. So when we're thinking about, we're not hiring for skills, we're hiring for people that are going to be able to learn and flourish with us, and we teach them the skills. That's part of the apprenticeship. That's what that's about, and we're really invested in that.
And Becky, could I get you just to unpick for us what strengths means? I think in our world, the strengths-based approach is common jargon, but I think when you compare that to, for example, a UCAS form, which is what most students are encouraged to do, what is strengths-based all about? Because it sounds like jargon.
You put me on the spot now. You haven't.
Yeah, totally.
So strengths is about the things that make you. This is my crude definition of strengths. This is a typical thing where I'm kind of talk about it all the time. When you ask me the question, I'm like, strengths is we use a process whereby we not judge in a bad way, but we're looking for those key indicators. You can probably see how animated I am about talking about apprenticeships because it's my strength, it's my passion, it's my thing. I love it. Talk to me in around data and numbers and situations where I'd have to be Jarashan, I would have low energy. I would not be responding. You wouldn't get much conversation out of me. What we know from our years of recruiting at Microsoft is that there are certain strengths. So think about a strength in the terms of, let's use flexibility. So it's key for somebody at Microsoft to be able to be agile, to be flexible around changing demands and priorities day on day, hour on hour, minute on minute. If you haven't got the strength, the kind of, the potential to be that, it makes it really hard to have a job with us. So we look for the 5 key areas that make a great Microsoft apprentice. And what we also say about that process is, it's not that if you don't or not successful with us, that's not because you're not great. It's just we need to set people up for success, to complete their apprenticeship programs and to have that first step in the world of work. So it's a strange process in some respects. I think strange because our managers want to ask probing questions and they want to kind of look at a CV and because they can make some judgments based on, I've been to school, I've got this grade, I've got this and that. Our hiring managers don't see CVs. And we only ever reveal those to the very last minute. My dream would be able to not think about entry points based on GCSE grades, but as an employer, you have to judge that balance between setting somebody up for success and failure, and making sure that they're supported right the way through the learning journey. But that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that, again, it's really important because it's such a different process to that standardized UCAS form, which youngsters will have a lot of support in completing at school. We were talking to Yaz at Cisco last time, and she used the word authenticity. In other words, it's what you're looking for is the genuine person to see how they're going to fit, as opposed to something that's over-rehearsed.
You can't almost lie in strengths. You can't practice it. Jerry, I don't know whether you felt it during the process, but you kind of, when you're answering those questions, they're natural. You can't rehearse it. So however many times the questions potentially get shared on the student room or whatever, this is about your authentic response to real life potential situations in Microsoft and whether that would be a great fit for you to be a successful person.
Yeah, definitely. It was more like you as a person and how you would be in that situation.
Yeah. And it always causes tension, right? We use an application, but we never screen on the CV because, so many people come from many, many different backgrounds. They might not have had the opportunity to do Duke of Edinburgh or this and that, which of course make brilliant young people. But how do you give everybody that wants to apply for a role an opportunity? And just because they haven't had a certain situation that they've been exposed to, how can you rule that person out? So it's just about being fair, David, as we start to bring people through our process.
And I think it's really interesting that there are quite a few large employers who are kind of striving for that same goal you set out there, where actually we're not defining people by the quality of a CV or their grades. We're really trying to get behind the skin and understand what's going on. So no, that's really interesting. Thank you. Now, the other thing, of course, that's different with apprenticeships, no matter what level they are, and UCAS is the timing. So if someone's interested in joining up with you or one of those 25,000 Microsoft partners, what should they be doing and when should they be preparing themselves for applications?
Great question, David. So we're open now for applications. It's so interesting. Jerry's intake, so what we call FY, which is financial year 21. So Microsoft works in different to a normal calendar year. So for us, we're in something called financial year 21. Jerry's intake was the first ever apprentice intake we've done remotely. And already it's come that we're doing it again. So we're opening slightly earlier this year. We're open now. And people can go to Get My First Job and obviously find our vacancies there. Our financial year 22 cohort, which is what we're recruiting for, will also be brought in virtually as well. So just as a kind of, right now as an employer, we just want to make sure that we're keeping people safe and the decision has been made that we are going to do that again virtually. If things change, we will adapt, but it's just to set that expectation. The Microsoft Apprenticeship Connector is the kind of place where we are developed with David and the team at Get My First Job to bring together the app. Like Microsoft has all those partners that sit around us. We want to make sure that our brand attracts talent into smaller SMEs who have just as amazing jobs, who are awesome at what they do, deliver brilliant apprenticeships, but it's difficult to find them because they're SMEs and young people and parents might be like, well, I've never heard of this. organization? How can I trust? What is it? So we're using the Microsoft Apprenticeship Connector as a kind of umbrella to all of our partner vacancies that are with our partner ecosystem, and then also have Microsoft training as part of the apprenticeship. And there where you'll find, David, I think from a Scottish and English perspective, all of our other opportunities that we have within our ecosystem, and think about that as a more of an always on approach. And we're redirecting and helping through the support of David's team. Anybody that comes through the Microsoft process will also then be redirected to our partners, because you can't have waste in we can't have massive amounts of applications that come in for our programs, and for young people to feel like they've got no opportunity, especially right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point, because one of the things I think there's still a misconception out there is that apprenticeships are easy to get onto. In some ways, they're more competitive than the university route. So, Jarosh, and I think I was looking at the numbers actually. Last year there were, was it 700-800 people applied to get into Microsoft on your cohort. So how tough was it going through that process?
I mean, for me, so the first stage was me doing my CV. Obviously, as any job, you would do your CV. So that was a big stress for me. Being like 18, no one teaches you how to do CV, right? You're doing your UCAS form like everyone else does. So for me, that was one of the biggest things initially. I submitted that, then I got in. I was like, okay, next stage. So the first stage for me was, it might be different now, but it was a interview with the university recruiter, or the U recruiter, and this was like more like, you can't really prepare for it. It was like, it's not like an interview like, okay, why Microsoft, like the standard questions that you prepare for. So I was completely thrown off my game over there. So when I was here, she was asking me situations that I would be put in and how would I respond to that, and it was more competency based, so to see me as a person. And I was like, okay, this isn't that tough, because I'm just talking about something I would do as a person rather than rehearse the answer why Microsoft's the best company in the world, blah blah blah. So then there was this, and then after the final stage was when had an interview with my manager currently and someone else on my team. So I think this was actually quite fun in a way, because you get to see if you want to work there and
Yeah.
if they want you. It was basically a conversation. They were just like, so this is what we do. And it ended up with me asking them more questions about how, I was just curious and how the team works, because I've never heard of, like, being 18. You know about all these big companies, but you don't know about the small individual roles in the company. So it's a way for you to like learn more about your role, and also for them to learn more about you. So why I want to work in a company instead of going to university. That was one of the biggest reasons why not choose university. So that's how it went for me.
And I love the fact you used the word curious there. I think that will get lots of ticks. I mean, that is kind of the ability to really go in and want to understand. And I think the other point you made that's really important is that interviews are a two-way thing, aren't they? This is about you choosing if you want to go there as much as the organisation saying if they want to hire you.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the reasons for me was I never enjoyed school. I was, as an academic, I could study, but most of my academic life, I had around, like, for A levels, I had about 40% attendance at school. I just didn't enjoy learning something and not applying it. And the apprenticeship did exactly that. I learned something and I applied it into my job. And my manager was like, "Yeah, that's exactly why we support apprenticeships as well."
Great way of learning. Well, thank you both very much indeed. It's been a really great conversation, and we'll obviously put a link on the Get My First Job website to the various resources that we've talked about this evening. So thank you very, very much indeed, Becky and Jerry. And thank you for joining this Talent Talk. So next time we're going to be talking logistics and supply chains. So find out how that sector is changing, the wide range of opportunities that exist with one of the global leaders, DHL. And I think we may well bump into digital on that talk too. So thank you for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next time round.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.